Hello, everyone, and welcome to our webinar, 8 Benchmarks for Growth. I'm so glad you carved out 20 to 30 minutes of your time today to spend with us to talk about this, because I know many of you are right in the middle of your 2024 planning. I know you're probably already done a lot of it, but maybe we'll show you a few things today that aren't on your radar that need to be on your radar. So the reason we came up with this series, we always like to do something around fourth quarter that helps distributors plan for their upcoming year. If you're brand new to commonsku, by the way, we are promotional products business software. We are partnered with over 750 distributor companies. Today's webinar is brought to you free, no charge, courtesy of commonsku. If you want to check it out, how to power and gain sanity back in your life through a sophisticated and easy order management system, check us out at commonsku.com/demo. But thank you for being here. Thanks for spending your time with me and us today. My name is Bobby Lihue. I'm the Chief Content Officer at commonsku. In a prior life, I was a distributor. So I was a distributor for 20 plus years, and we focused on company stores and shops and things like that. So a little bit of experience every year going through this exercise of trying to figure out what our goals for growth would be for the upcoming year. This is based on a series that we wrote, a two-part series that talked about benchmarks. Like, one of the challenging parts about thinking about your growth for the upcoming year is what to even aim for. Not even knowing what the current stats are or how other people are growing. I hope to demystify that a little bit for you here today. So this is based on this two-part article. You can grab it out at community.commonsku.com, or you can just sit back and listen today and get the Cliff's Notes as we walk through it. The inspiration for this particular series is from a futurist named Kevin Kelly. Kevin Kelly had a TED Talk that was titled "The Future Will Be Shaped by Optimism." It was viewed by over 2 million people. Kevin Kelly talked about two types of growth. He talked about type 1 growth and type 2 growth. Type 1 growth is adding. It's what we know as growth. It's betterment. It's getting larger. It's adding clients. It's growing revenue. That's type 1 growth. We're all very familiar with that. But Kevin talked about something called type 2 growth, which I really loved and should factor into our 2024 goals. Type 2 growth is about betterment, getting richer and better in our experience, getting better as a company, getting the right kinds of clients, for example. So today, as we go through benchmarks, we're not just going to talk about top line growth and growing revenue, but we're going to talk about other things as well. So one way Kevin put it was, type 1 growth is getting consumers to drink more wine. Type 2 growth is getting consumers to drink better wine. And so in our businesses, we have things like type 1 growth, which are our total gross sales, our growth by client, but we have type 2 growth too, which is our margin. We have employee engagement, client engagement, different things like that. So if we're working on both of those, we're building in type 2 growth a very, very solid foundation, as well as an aggressive growth plan for increase. So there we go. There's the premise for today's talk. A lot of the things that we end up wrangling with come directly from you. So this is a snapshot of the CEO Summit that we held, one of two that we held just this past year, where we ask attendees, and these are folks that are all sort of running businesses just like you. So these really typify some of the demands and needs today. So these are the kinds of things that you and others are struggling with, such as scaling and hiring and recruiting and team development and training and reporting. So you're going to see me sprinkle some things like this throughout the presentation based on the knowledge we have of what folks are dealing with currently. All right, jump right into it. The benchmarks that we need to consider next year as we're considering our growth plans. The first one, year-over-year growth. I know that's obvious, but as a distributor, I struggled with this. I often came up with just random figures. I would hear that somebody else grew at a certain rate, and I would either judge myself for not growing as much or judge myself that maybe my sights are too high. So I was never really sure what to aim for. So we have some figures to run by you. First of all, take a glance at the screen. And I want you to sort of figure what would be a reasonable growth amount. And I'll tell you where these numbers come from, okay? First of all, the average industry growth is 5%. So you take the aggregate of reported numbers through PPAI, the Promotional Products Association International, and you aggregate those into how fast did everybody grow, and it's about 5%. And that's almost the same every year, obviously not including pandemic years and things like that where we had sharp declines. But on average, when you're in growth seasons, it's only about 5%. Now, PPAI just released a study called the Top 100, and of the top 100 distributors that they evaluated in their criteria, they found that the median growth percentage was 17%. So that kind of gives you a little bit of a figure to go on. Now, the average growth for all the distributors on the commonsku platform is 20% growth. So I think that might help you a little bit as you're thinking through. I remember I always had a 30% figure in my head, and I never really had any sophisticated or mathematical way to get at that number. It was just something I plucked out of the air. We're going to show you how to not do that here in a few minutes. But average commonsku growth. So you take the we have so many distributors on the platform. Their average growth is 20%. Now, just yesterday, this gives you an example of the disparities that can happen in our industry or just the uniqueness of distributors. Just yesterday, I had two conversations with two different distributors. One distributor had increased 3% this year, somewhere, it was a single digit, somewhere around 3% this year. But last year, they'd increased 140%. I also talked with another distributor yesterday, a very large distributor who had increased by 10%, which 10%, when you're looking at a figure of the $30 to $50 million range, it's actually quite a leap. So my point is, you need to be able to come up with a pathway to figure your own growth in your own situation, because every distributor is different. We all serve different industries, different types of clients, and that needs to be factored in as well. If you serve a lot of retail and a lot of consumers type retail, then that's going to impact how you grow. If you serve the energy market and the energy market is in the tank, or the energy market is doing very well, that's going to impact how you grow. Even looking at your top 10 clients in their industries will factor into your growth goals. But let's get a little more granular here. How do we actually do it? I just want you to remember that 20% figure as something to keep in mind for your growth goals. Also, something you can do through the commonsku platform is you can set these sales targets, which is really cool. You can set these sales targets by rep. You can actually analyze these at any time throughout your day, your quarter, whenever you want to drop down and drill into this. You can look by client, rep by client, and see how you're tracking in your total scorecard. You can also set up an analytical board, which is like a scoreboard for employees and salespeople, which is kind of a fun thing to keep internally and keeps folks engaged. And if you can create fun contests around, it's all kinds of things you can do. But that's a cool leaderboard that you can check out as well through the reporting metrics. But I just want to show you that this detailed analysis is what folks are really wanting, and what we hope to have delivered through the platform are just so easy ways for you to get a handle on what's going on in your business at any time. Now, let's talk about aiming for a 20% benchmark for year-over-year growth. But how do you actually do that? Or maybe better yet, how do you even come up with that kind of figure, or something that's very realistic to what you want to do? First of all, by mapping goals from the clients to the general, to the business itself. And we do that by creating these quarterly client benchmarks for growth. So you take the aggregate in your overall company growth, you want to hit 20 or 30%, but how do you come up with that figure, that 20 or 30% that's unique to you? We had a fascinating conversation with Stephen Musgrave. He's the EVP of Genumark, one of North America's largest distributors. And Genumark has a huge sales force. Stephen presented at our event in the fall called SKU Camp, and he talked about the distinction between farmers and hunters as far as salespeople go. The episode is out there for you to drill down and listen to the whole thing, but I cut a clip from it so you could hear how one of the largest distributors in North America actually maps their growth in a way that's more granular, and that's just not a general guessing game. So here's just a clip from a very natural conversation I had with Stephen about it. What were some of the farming type tactics that led to growth in that environment? Like, with marketing as a priority, sales goals, margins, if you had to narrow down your success, since you basically ran a business with nothing but farmers, if I'm right, what were some of those like key tactics that sort of helped you grow the business with that type of person in the role? Those things. You did a lot of tactical things like quarterly reviews and where are you at with the client and growth like that, and margin goals and all those kinds of things. What was that rhythm like?
A lot of times it would vary on individual reps, because some people take to this more naturally than others.
Yeah, right.
Now I'm pushing us towards a cycle where we have quarterly client growth plans that are stored right in the client profile in commonsku. So we can have, like, if you're thinking about the 5-3-1 rule, the idea of the client growth plan is like, this quarter we want to do this. It's like a mission statement for the quarter of where we want to see the relationship get. It's the types of build relationship questions we want to get answers to that we don't know. Like we have a conversation, we dive into the client a bit, look at where the relationship is, come up with some of those questions so that the people that less naturally have them come to mind when they're when they're in the moment, like we're laying them out before, and all they have to do is remember, like, oh yeah, I am trying to find out like how many people are on the marketing team, whatever the
Yeah.
question is. And then we have a section with like some proactive things that we want them to do in the next quarter that are not just processing an order.
Yeah.
Status them as growth plans, and then I can just, like they can be accountable to themselves and go work on those growth plans. And if they're really busy and finding a hard time being proactive, at any minute their boss might be like, let's take a look at how your growth plans are going. We're trying to I want to set them quarterly, review them sporadically throughout the quarter, and tie them into annual plans. I'm big at setting sales targets for clients, like numbers, but these are relationship plans that tie back to how to hit the numbers we want to hit and how those two things work together.
It's timeless, and it's going to sound a little pedantic, but that 90-day goal, like those breaking that year up into quarters, is so powerful. And in the SaaS business, we use OKRs for our quarterly goals and measurement. And then of course
we're an EOS company, we're not not like werewolves and vampires, we're like not the same thing, but like we're closely related.
Yeah. You love your contrast. I love that. The EOS use rocks, but it's so vital. Like it's so vital. Yeah. Otherwise, in this business, because you can grow or you can drop clients so quickly, it gives us something to aim at. But that 90-day goal to me is such it can be a little bit of pressure, but it's also far better to have that than it is some annual unrealistic goal that you can't even put your hands around.
Yeah, that's some of the idea of this. Even I just did one of these deep dive sessions and built out a client growth plan with one of the she's been around for like 6 years now, so she's not that new. In the perspective of Genumark, where the average tenure is a decade, and we have lots of people who have been here over 25 years. She's pretty new.
Yeah.
And we were going through talking about how this year she's going to do $70,000 with this client, but next year she wants to do 130. And I'm like, I don't want you coming into January thinking, all right, January 1st, let's go get $130,000. I want you going into the quarter thinking, what small things do I need to do that make a difference as I'm doing my daily work?
Absolutely.
How can I make this bite size so it's not overwhelming and I'm not scrambling and dropping the ball on it? And also I'm trying to ensure that the questions we're asking and the things we're doing are adding value to the work we're doing for the client. They're not like sleazy sales things we want to find out or tricks we want to do. They're like, what can we actually do to be a better company and a better partner for our clients to grow them?
Very tactical things you can measure as a leading.
Love that. I was wrapping up there, just very tactical things that you can do with your clients. This whole conversation is phenomenal. He talked about the 5-3-1 rule, which you can check out at this QCast, that recording that we did with Stephen as well. So client target setting, here's a glimpse of what that can look like when you do this. And I just absolutely love this idea of taking this big, huge goal, breaking it down, asking yourself, how more granular can we get with this? And then backtracking that, or reverse engineering, as Catherine Graham would say, reverse goals as well. This idea came up during our CEO summit too, and that was setting up your own scoring system for clients. I thought this was a phenomenal idea, and this is honestly my first crack at it, but it's something I want to play with a little more. And maybe you can do this in your own organization, and that is creating some sort of system or symbol where you can understand how a client is doing every quarter. So for example, if margin is dropping, maybe this client has a yellow light in their client relationship, or growth is down by 20% or something. But creating your own metrics around clients that you want to see, maybe bigger margins with clients, that you want to see larger average order sizes with clients, number of sales presentations, which we'll get into next, and just the overall happiness score. It's a great way to get granular about your goals, and again, just to build those backwards. So what you would do, let's take your top 10 clients, for example. Every rep would analyze where they think they can grow with that client in the upcoming year. They consider the economy, how the customer is doing. Is the customer going through layoffs? Are they growing? Because some customers might have the potential to grow 120%. Some customers might have the potential to grow 20%. And then you end up creating this very microscopic goal towards something that's tactical. And like Steven said, you can put your arms around it in 90 days. Another really great example of 90-day sprint. We had the amazing Tom Rowan speak at SKU Camp, and he had just finished the week before. He had just finished the UTMB, the one of the most prestigious long distance ultra running races in the world at Mont Blanc. It's a 106-mile race with 33,000 feet of climb. And Tom joined us a week later to talk about this. We had a podcast episode with Tom where he talked about this 90-day sprint. And one of the things that I love what Tom said is, you remember we were talking about type 1 growth and type 2 growth? He's talking a little bit about type 2 growth here. Here's a very brief clip with Tom to talk about it.
You can't just focus on all these problems and negative things in the business, because then all of a sudden, like, you're just feeling this weight of, we're always constantly fixing things or solving problems and stuff like that. So you got to take that, but then also add the positive stuff in there too, and make sure you're focusing on 99% completion rate of meeting deadlines, and whatever those positive metrics and different things are that you can keep pushing out there. So then it balances that out a little bit.
If anyone knows about how to knock out a huge goal, take things and break them down into 90-day sprints, is what Tom has become a master at. You heard Steven and I in that clip that I played reference a couple of books and resources for you. One is OKRs, Measuring What Matters. If you don't know about it, it's a fantastic book that we have used as a big part of our growth. Also Traction, Gino Wickman. We've had a few guests from the whole Traction organization come on and talk about the EOS system. Distributors tend to gravitate toward Traction a lot because they find with commonsku, they have found the operating system that helps them scale and grow. And then Traction becomes this sort of a management handbook for them as they're growing in their leadership and everything as well. So just two resources for you to check out as well. All right, real briefly, I want to mention this. New logo growth. Like, what should be our goal for new logo growth? Some folks might not even have a new logo growth goal, which of course is growing new clients or business development for new clients and prospects. And I definitely think you should break this out per rep, or depending on their book of business and how they can handle it. New logo growth might vary between rep, and it should vary between rep depending on the size of their book of business. But what would be your new logo growth goal? The first time I'd ever seen a statistic come out was when PPAI did their top 100, and they actually came up with a figure. And I was so happy to see it because I'd never really seen a figure around this is what should be my aim, what should be my benchmark for adding new customers. And they found out in the top 100 that they created as a clarifier for who are the top 100 distributors in the business. They had all kinds of criteria, as you can see there, but the average new logo growth was 20%. The median was 18%. So I hope that helps you a little bit as you're thinking through. At the very least, what you can do is you have something to know, a baseline to start from. And that's what I love about benchmarking altogether. Okay, talk a little bit about margins. Margins also are one of those factors that when you hear distributors talk about margin benchmarks, the one thing I always want you to keep in mind are operating costs. When we went through the pandemic as an industry, many of us got into fulfillment and kitting, and our operations burden became a lot heavier. Margins in the industry have pretty much stayed the same for about the past decade or more, around 35%, which is astonishing when you think about it, because a lot has changed. HR payroll has increased. Like I said, the operating burden has increased. If you're not charging for services and you're building that into product fees, then you can see you might still have a 35% margin. We all feel great, but you're adding less to the bottom line at the end of the day. And distributors are all wired different. There may be some distributors who have 80% of the business is import, so their margins may be off the charts. There may be other distributors who 80% of their business is fulfillment and kitting, and so they might struggle with a lower margin percentage. The average industry margins, I mentioned, around 35%. In PPAI's research report, the median top 100 reported 35% margins. But here's the deal. I know example after example of distributors who have 50 plus margins, 43% margins. I know plenty of distributors who have average 28% margins. So
I just sort of want to challenge you to think about margins in a different way. Like, how do we get our hands around this tactically and do something with it to make a difference in a way that's sort of respectful of our business and the uniqueness of our model? Here's the tip, and that is to take your top 10 clients, top best clients, and figure out what their average margin is. Maybe it's your top 5 clients. You love working with them. They love working with you. The projects you're working on, there's high order average. There's not no problems, because there's never no problems, but there's less problems. But they're your top 10 clients, your top 5 clients. Figure that, because then you kind of know what you need to aim for with all your other clients. You might have a client book of business with 100 clients, but the 80-20 rule is really alive and well in this industry, where 80% of your revenue comes from 20% of your clients. Take your top 10. You may end up firing your bottom 20%. Or you might say, you know what, we're raising margins on these bottom 20% clients. And we're okay with them leaving if they don't like the fact that that's going to happen, because we have a valuable service. We need clients to pay for our service, and you know the drill. But it's a really effective way for you to look and stop and say, okay, here's our overall company margins, but what are our best margins with our best clients? And then how can we scale and repeat that in our particular business? Of course, in commonsku, you can do this through reporting. You can actually look at your build margin, your booked margin average at any time by rep. You can drill down in details there as well. All right, one of my favorite tips this year came from Kirby Hasseman, who is a distributor out of Ohio. He has been a distributor for years, and I loved his advice because he's a strategic thinker, and he thinks long and hard about a lot of these things. He talked about something called leading indicators versus lagging indicators, which I know we've all heard about and talked about, but often our sales results are a scorecard about at the end of the game, like what happened in that quarter. What happened in those 6 months? Often when you look at any kind of results, they might be search results, web results, you're looking at past history. You're looking out the back window at what happened. You're not looking forward. So what is something that we can do that's tactical, that we can build in, that would give us a benchmark or an indicator that would help us actually do something tactical for sales? This is a great tip from Kirby here, and I highlighted the report that he's talking about as well.
What type of activities do you track that help you the most at Hasseman Marketing?
Yeah, I can get super specific because this is something we've really sort of unpacked this year. So I think one of the challenges is understanding what specifically to track. And so let me just talk about the difference between lead measures and lag measures. I think one of the things that people track all the time are the lag measures, right? That's the thing that has happened at the end. So in the promotional products industry, I want to sell $10,000 this week. And that's great. That is something that you should be tracking. But at the end of the week on Friday, you either did it or you didn't do it, right? You can't affect it at that moment. So that's one of the lag measures. Another one might be like invoicing, right? Like how much did we invoice this week? How much did we sell this week? Those are great measures. But we like to focus a lot on lead measures. So lead measures are the things that you have complete control over, that will lead you to the result you want. So in fitness, I want to lose 10 pounds, but the lead measure is I need to, eat better and drink less and work out more, right? But like, I'm going to work out 30 minutes a day. I'm going to eat so many calories. Those are things you have complete control over that will lead you to the goal. So in the promotional products industry, we found that we looked for years to try and figure out exactly what those were. Is it the number of pieces of content that we post? Is it the number of calls? Is it the number of meetings? What we found about 3-4 years ago is that the person in our company who sends the most presentations sells the most, right? It's very specific through commonsku to give that sort of shout out. And it was funny because in the meeting I discovered, I was like, well, who sent the second most? And they said, who sent the second most? I'm like, who had the second most sales? Same person. Like it was, and I was like, okay, once we unpack that, well, but that needs the number of presentations we send out each week is an indicator, not necessarily of sales that week, but of future sales.
I love it. Yes.
So it's touches, which is phone calls, meetings, all things that you can track through commonsku, and presentations. So that's like the total, and then presentations. And then, obviously we measure, okay, have we gotten any more email newsletter people? We have about, I think, 10 different things that we track, but several of them are, oh yeah, those make sense. Like, how much do we have out in receivables? How much do we send? How many orders? Those sort of things. But well, and the other thing that I find is in those weeks, and inevitably there are those weeks where sales suck.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
But
Yes.
what did our activity look like? What did presentations look like? And so, I'll give you, again, I'm telling on myself a little bit. So our first 5 months, we were killing it. And then in June and July, we slowed down. And as I went back and looked at our numbers, our presentations fell down. Our touches fell down while we were busy, which makes sense. But had I pulled on that lever earlier, maybe we would have pulled out of it faster. So keeping track of, that's why there's so much power in that.
That's a great point.
But during July, I'm like, yeah, but what can we control? And what we can control is presentations and touches and, reaching out to people. And so, to me, it's not a surprise that August came back, because we took control of those things we could control it in June and July.
I love it. It gives us something tactical we can do, something tangible that we can do and measure, and go to our team and do something proactive.
Fantastic. I'm repeating myself, but the thing that I love too is you tie in what Stephen Musgrave said to tracking individual clients to what Kirby said. Now you have something you can actually do. You can say, you can look, for example, client A, you can say, you know what, in first quarter of 2023, we had X amount of sales and we sent X number of presentations. I want to increase my number of presentations this year to that client by X%. And that's something you can control. That's something you can actually put your hands around and do something about. Absolutely. Just love that tip. It's my favorite tip. Because I think for years I've done that thing that Kirby has done, which is sort of look in the rearview mirror all the time at sales and not really have something that you can do that really moves the needle on the difference. Like, what can I do today, sitting here right now with a lagging client? And that's something you can do right now, is present new ideas. By the way, the number one reason a client fires you in the promotional products industry is and it's always the same thing. It's the same thing. They always say the same thing. Number one, not enough new ideas. What that means is not enough TLC, not enough attention to my account, not enough proactive selling. And we're in the game of helping you be a proactive salesperson. That's our role. So we want you to do more of that. Okay. We introduced something new called the Supplier Spend Benchmark. I just want to mention this briefly so that you can get an idea of what it's about. I think this is vitally important. One of my mentors in the business, I remember going to an expo one year, and he had a report in his hands that I recognized. It was his Supplier Spend Report, and he was going around to all his key strategic partners and spending enough time with them, like making sure that he spent time with his top 10 strategic supplier partners, because we're in this business together. Distributors are suppliers. Salesforce, suppliers. We as distributors are nothing without suppliers. And knowing that gives you another indicator in your business about how you're doing with certain companies. So I mentioned, I think it's really important as an operating report, but there's just a glance of what that can look like as well. All right, we're getting toward the end here, I promise. I want to touch on briefly team engagement. Because remember, type 1 growth is helping us get more and add and increase, and type 2 growth is about betterment. And often the best thing you can do is focus in certain seasons, or maybe all the time now, on type 2 growth, because it leads to type 1 growth. And here's what I mean by that. Gallup had a poll that talked about that the average engagement in the world is only 32%. Think about that for a minute. Engaged employees on average, they're only really engaged around 32%. Now, would you want anyone to phone in 2/3 of their workday every day? You wouldn't. Best practice organizations have 72+% engagement. We really started focusing on this as an organization, and really drilling into our own engagement and spending time on that. We're on our second year where we are measuring engagement and doing something about it internally, and it has been absolutely phenomenal for us and our team. A couple of things that you can use to help. One is there is a 20 employee engagement survey questions that you should ask out on the Culture Amp website. Go check it out. Build your own employee engagement. It really just starts with asking questions and finding out where folks are at, because it's astonishing the percentage of productivity that increases, sales increase. None of that should be a surprise to us, but that's the case. Also, we have a wonderful episode out there with author Joey Coleman. Forgive me for the sirens in the background. This is real time and live. Here we go. Joey Coleman. So I interviewed Joey on the SKUcast, and Joey is a keynote speaker at SKUCon in January. Cannot wait for this, where Joey in January is going to talk about client engagement. But wow, did he have some powerful, mind-blowing stats on employee engagement. We don't have a clip from this, but I encourage you to go check this out. If this is something you want to focus on, I highly encourage you to start with Joey Coleman and go from there. All right, number 8, as we're wrapping here, I'm going to talk about your ICP, your ideal customer profile. Who is your ideal customer? In the promotional products industry, I think one of the things that happens as we grow is we end up naturally doing business with whoever we can. First of all, we're hungry, we're new in the business, and we end up attracting clients wherever we can get them. At the end, we end up with this interesting mosaic of different types of clients, different types of industries. As we grow, we tend to develop a specialty. Maybe we're working more in finance, or maybe we're working more in the insurance industry. Maybe we're working more with camps. Maybe we're working more with agencies or tech. We begin to develop our own ICP. The interesting thing, if you're a supplier on the call today, this is fascinating because one of my favorite conversations this past year was with Sterling Wilson, the president of Pop Promos, about developing your ICP. And I want you to hear this through the lens of whether you're a supplier or distributor. It's such phenomenal advice about figuring out who your clients are. But what would you advise? And of course, we're speaking to the audience of entrepreneurs that are running suppliers. Maybe they're a smaller supplier that just got into the business, or maybe they're a distributor or agency. What would you tell them different to focus on or not focus on?
First things first, talk to your customers and try and understand them and what they want and what they need. I mean, we used to say, oh, we work with promotional products distributors, but realistically, the difference between different distributors' businesses around this industry, from spot buys to customer mix to programs where they have their own warehouses and inventory to fulfillment to, I mean, it's just incredible the diversity of customers in this industry. And we tried our best, but didn't understand our customer well enough for years. And we're still trying to better understand exactly, all the different needs around the industry. So I'd say that's first and foremost, is get to know your customer. Second one I'd say is pick your customer well. Like, we don't service the whole industry. Like, we do not work with everyone. We're not the right fit for everyone. Like, we're really heavily focused on enterprise clients. Like 50+% of our revenue flows to big corporate companies. We focus on quality and making sure the color's right and delivering 99+% of orders on time or early. And it's a quality play and a service play. But there are lots of different positions within this industry in every product category. So get to know your customers and figure out who you're serving, because it's not everyone. Try and serve everyone. You can't do it that well.
Thank you for saying that, by the way. I'll let you finish. I'm sorry to interrupt. Thank you for saying that about the distributor clients, because I think that's a big mistake that suppliers tend to make, is oversimplifying the distributor market.
It's shocking. We started tracking a few years ago programs, meaning it's not a one-time buy for an event, but it's going into a uniform or an ongoing gift program or a new employee program or something else. And I got to tell you, the findings have been shocking. We had no idea so much of our business was this kind of recurring, like long-term contract-based thing between our distributors and the end users. And now that we know that, we're better able to service it because we get the needs and the inventory risk concerns and everything else. And candidly, we had no idea before. So.
Love that advice. So who's your ICP? Who are your top 10 clients? Go back to that top 10 list. One exercise that I love to do every year is to take my top 10 clients, list them in declining order by revenue. And then I like to, on the same sheet of paper, list them by declining order in profit, because sometimes that's not the same list. And you get to get a picture of who your best clients are. So who's your ICP? Of your top 10 clients, what are those average margins that we talked about? What kind of services are you providing for them? What's your happy factor with those customers? However you want to gauge that. What's your average order size? There's so many things that you can figure out, like category, for example, what you're selling in terms of category, not product category, but purpose. Maybe you're doing employee onboarding kits, but you're not doing anything with the sales department there or the marketing department. So there's lots of ways to grow, but who's your ICP? It's one of the most important things heading into 2024 you can do. Refining your customer base is actually one of the best ways to figure out how to grow moving forward. I cannot recommend it enough. All right, let's review real quick. Year-over-year growth, we recommend average 20%. Margins, obviously 35 plus, 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 if you can get that. New logo growth, 20% is what we recommend. Quarterly client benchmarks for growth, per client. Drill down and look at that per client. Come up with your own goal plans per client. Leading indicators versus lagging indicators. Number of presentations is such a healthy way to move into 2024, looking at that and giving something actionable for your team. Your supplier spend benchmark also tells you how you're growing with your most strategic partners. And finally, some resources for team engagement and ICP. Hope that was helpful for you today. We always ask our customers what it is they want to learn from us the most. And these are some of the things that you're looking at. So we end up populating these on our website. We have everything from how can I grow my business to how can I use the platform better to what's going on at commonsku. How are others using commonsku? How can we connect with the community and with others? All kinds of things out there on community.commonsku.com. Also, highly encourage you to check out our newsletter called The Backpack. Our issue drops tomorrow. It's released the first and third Friday of each month. It's one of our favorite things that we produce because it features trends in merch, just the merch lifestyle, kind of what's going on with the leaders and the movers and shakers in the industry. You can subscribe, you and your team, at commonsku.com/backpack. And again, if you enjoyed this demo, if you enjoyed being a part of the experience, if you thought this was really helpful, we have a whole lot more tools out there, and we highly encourage you to check us out as an operating system to help you grow and get better in 2024. Check us out at commonsku.com/demo. Thank you, my friends. Talk soon.